All right, we're joined now by Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee, also vice chair of the Trump transition team. Congresswoman, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Let's start here with this exchange between Congressman Lewis and the president-elect. What do you make of what you heard from your colleague there in the House and the response from the president-elect?
Well, John Lewis is someone who is very dear to the members of the House, and it was so disappointing to me to hear him say that. And we all know that the Russians did not get into any of the voting machines. There was no change in the vote totals because of that. The Russians, we have to also recognize, have been in the propaganda business for years and years and years, trying to influence public opinion, whether it's in the United States or other countries, Europe, of course. You can look at the Czech Republic, Radio Free Europe. I was over there yesterday, and they were highlighting with us the amount of money that the Russians were spending on over-the-air propaganda. So, you know, this is not something that is new. I'm surprised that it took a lot of people this long to realize that the Russians are so heavily embedded in the propaganda business, and I'm delighted that now people want to join us, and other colleagues in the House want to join us in addressing data security and cybersecurity issues. And my hope is that with Rudy Giuliani leading that team and with the subcommittee I chair, Communications and Technology, we're going to get something done with cyber encryption and data security.
Let me ask you about this call, this
Sure.
exchange between the incoming National Security Advisor, General Michael Flynn, and with the Russian ambassador
Sure.
to the U.S. We know that there was a call, in addition to some text messages about the holidays that have been released, but there was a call on the very day that the Obama administration announced the sanctions against Russia. Was that an appropriate exchange for the incoming, not yet NSA director, to speak with the Russian ambassador?
To be working to schedule a call, I think, is appropriate. I think the timing is unfortunate that it was that day. Of course, I fall into that camp that looks at Putin as being a thug and the Russians as very bad actors, and agree that they need to be held to account. And I'm certain that as President-elect Trump takes the oath of office on this coming Friday, and as he and his security team began to address these issues, there's going to be robust debate between them and also between my colleagues and I in the House on how we think we move forward with dealing not only with Russia, but looking at the other bad actors, you know, China, Iran. It's important to realize these are nations that have cyber war units.
Understood.
They do not wish us well.
Let me stay on Russia here, because you say that
Sure.
Vladimir Putin, in your words, is a thug and they need to be held accountable. But we've learned through this interview with the Wall Street Journal that despite on Wednesday, Donald Trump saying that he thinks that Russia's responsible for the hacking, that he's open to lifting the sanctions on Russia. Reconcile those two for me. If he believes that Russia's responsible for the hacking, why then would he consider lifting the consequences for said hacking?
I don't know the answer to that, and I think this is one of those elements of robust debate. Quite frankly, I appreciate robust debate. I think that it is healthy, and as we go through this process of looking at what they've done and have continued to do over many, many years, that what we will do is arrive at an appropriate solution to begin addressing this. What we need to see is leadership on the issue, and the Russians need to know that we are going to stand for America's interests first.
Do you think these sanctions should be lifted?
I'm not one who would be for lifting sanctions. I think we need to be holding the Russians and the other bad actors to account.
All right, we've got much more to talk about. We've got Obamacare. We've got this exchange from Paul Ryan earlier this week. Stay with us, Congresswoman. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Sure.
We're back now with Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee and vice chair of the Trump transition team. I want to start this half with Obamacare. This week, both the House and the Senate started those first steps to repeal the Affordable Care Act. But the question is now, when will it be replaced and with what? Donald Trump says that it will happen simultaneously. Do you agree with that it will happen simultaneously? If not, what's your projected timeline?
Well, we're already working on replace. We started that last year when we passed the 21st Century Cures Bill, and President Obama signed that into law in December. And as you know, it was tremendously popular. Enormous bipartisan support. We'll put the emphasis on precision medicine, puts money into research at NIH, allows for healthcare informatics and the ability for new delivery systems for healthcare and remote monitoring, telemedicine, and then also will enable CMS to reform some of those payment systems.
And when will this be implemented?
Oh, it's in the law. And that is a component that we have already moved forward on. That's done, finished, it's the law, and we're thrilled with that. Now, going to the balance of this, as we do the reconciliation, which the reconciliation budget we passed yesterday, that's the document we will work on. And at some point in February, you will see us with the details. There are components, yes, dealing with Title I of Obamacare, which is the insurance title. That's got to get off the books, of course, and in its place, a cross-state line purchase of health insurance. Pardon me, bipartisan support on that, and then association health plans, health savings accounts, some of those components.
But Congresswoman, I
Yes.
had the same thing you have. I had it last week. So,
for some reason, just a tickle in my throat. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. As we look ahead to when this will be replaced, I mean, Republicans for 6 years have been saying repeal and replace. We know that you've been instrumental in offering legislation that was included in the Speaker's A Better Way program. But
Yes.
why isn't that prepared to pass as it's repealed?
It is prepared to pass. The bills are filed, the across-state line purchase of health insurance, H.R. 314. Go read it. It's a great bill, and it will open up that insurance market. And, you know, I would also say go back to the Blair House Healthcare Summit that President Obama called in February 2010. We laid out a private sector patient-centered model at that point in time. Democrats laid out a government control model. They went with theirs. What we're saying now, it didn't work, too expensive to afford, too expensive to use.
Right.
Let's go with the private sector model so that all Americans have access to affordable, patient-centered health care. That's where we need to be with this, and make certain that we get the costs down, that we get the access up, that networks are expanded, not narrowed.
We saw that there were at least 9 Republicans who crossed over and voted against the bill yesterday as they started the repeal process. Let me move on to DACA,
Sure.
the president's executive action on deferred action on childhood arrivals. Speaker Paul Ryan had an exchange during the CNN town hall on earlier this week with a woman named Angelica Villalobos, who is protected under DACA. I want you to watch that. Let's watch.
Do you think that I should be deported? And many of families in my situation should.
No, Angelica. First of all, I can see that you love your daughter, and you're a nice person who has a great future ahead of you, and I hope your future is here. But what we have to do is find a way to make sure that you can get right with the law, and we've got to do this in a good way so that the rug doesn't get pulled out from under you and your family gets separated. But if you're worried about, some deportation, force knocking on your door this year, don't worry about that.
Now, interestingly enough, you said 2 years ago to the day this about DACA in defense of your bill to freeze funding for it. Let's watch that.
Yeah. We're either a nation of laws or we are lawless. President Obama is turning every state into a border state, every town into a border town. And unfortunately, the lawless amnesty has taken Democrats from the party of yes, we can to acting like the party of because we can.
Lawless amnesty, you call it. What do you make of the Speaker's rhetorical embrace of the woman who's here protected under DACA, wanting her to have her future here in the U.S.?
Speaker Ryan is committed to working this out, and I am hopeful that legislation that I have written and supported, as have many others, the CLEAR Act, which deals with the criminal illegal aliens, will pass. On the DACA program, what we have to realize is when the president signed that executive order, what it did was to open the floodgates. We also, the thousands of people that came across the border, many of my colleagues, myself included, spent time down at the border with our Border Patrol agents and working through some of those reception centers and looking at the porous nature of the border and the condition that some of those children that were coming across that border, the vetting process, which was not tight, not knowing who those children were being released to, if they were going to gangs or individuals that were involved in sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking. And indeed, that is an issue that has to be dealt with. Can I tell you what the resolution is going to be between this administration and the Speaker of the House
Quickly,
and
if you can.
Leader McConnell? I don't know. I do know that they're committed to dealing with the sanctuary cities, the criminal illegal aliens, and those that are coming into the country illegally.
All right, Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Vice Chair of the Donald Trump Transition Team, thanks so much for being with us on New Day.
Good to be with you. Thank you.